March 1974. 29 years had passed since the end of World War II. The globe had completely rebuilt itself. New generations had grown up in peacetime, and former enemies were now close economic allies. But deep in the dense forests of the Philippines' Lubang Island, the war was still actively happening, yet his service rifle and sword were kept in perfectly pristine condition. He was fully armed, watching the tree line, expecting an American ambush at any moment. Hiroo Onoda remained lucid and observant during these years, receiving constant signals from the outside world. He viewed every interaction through a specific lens of intelligence training, interpreting all external communication as strategic deception designed to lure him out of the trees. This 29-year campaign serves as a case study in the persistence of the psychological framework built by the Japanese military, a system designed to maintain combat readiness long after the objective reality has shifted. To understand Onoda's mindset, we have to look back at the environment he was born into. In 1922, Imperial Japan was aggressively expanding. From infancy, citizens were exposed to an intense societal curriculum. Children were taught absolute, unquestioning loyalty to the emperor, and that surrendering in battle was a deeply shameful fate, far worse than death. At the elite Nakano military school, Onoda specialized in intelligence gathering and guerrilla tactics. He survived behind enemy lines, disrupted supply chains, and vanished into the terrain, skills designed to turn a single operative into a force multiplier, capable of exhausting entire armies. In late 1944, as Japan rapidly lost ground to the Allies, his commanding officer, Major Taniguchi, gave him his final orders. He was to deploy to Lubang Island. He was strictly forbidden from surrendering and strictly forbidden from taking his own life. Taniguchi promised that whether it took 3 years or 5 years, the army would return for him. That triad of commands, never surrender, never die by your own hand, and wait for your commander's return, built an inescapable mental trap. It established a framework where enduring any hardship was the only acceptable option. In August 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan formally capitulated. The paperwork was signed, the troops were recalled, and World War II completely ended. Allied forces knew there were still guerrilla units scattered across the Pacific Islands, so they dropped hundreds of thousands of leaflets from the air, declaring the war over. Onoda analyzed these documents and concluded the Allies were using his own language to manufacture a sophisticated counterintelligence trap. Certain that the conflict was raging on, Onoda and his 3 remaining squadmates vanished into the island's interior. They slept on wet ground, survived on raw bananas and coconuts, and occasionally raided local farms to steal rice or butcher cattle, drying the meat in the sun to endure the harsh seasons. This timeline tracks the size of Onoda's squad over the decades, as the group was eroded by desertion and combat. As each comrade fell, the psychological cost of the mission increased. To accept that the war was over would be to admit his friends had died for a fiction, a psychological debt that made any thought of surrender feel like a betrayal of the dead. Looking at that same timeline, as his squad disappears, the damage he inflicted climbs. Operating under his original disruption orders, Onoda and his men treated the Philippine locals as enemy combatants. Over the span of those 29 years, they killed over 30 local residents and injured more than 100. His specialized training effectively filtered reality, reclassifying every genuine outreach from the Philippine government and his own family as a tactical maneuver by a clever enemy. Search parties and military units spent decades failing to capture him. Then, in early 1974, a 24-year-old Japanese college dropout and adventurer named Norio Suzuki traveled to Lubang. Wandering the jungle alone, Suzuki accomplished what the military couldn't. He found Onoda in exactly 4 days, without firing a single shot. Suzuki sat down with the exhausted officer and explained that Japan was now a wealthy, peaceful economic powerhouse. Onoda listened, but his programming held firm. He stated he would not lay down his rifle until his direct commanding officer arrived to officially relieve him of duty. Suzuki returned to Japan with photographs, sparking a massive government effort. They tracked down Major Taniguchi, the man who issued the 1944 orders. Taniguchi had long since left the military and was working as a bookseller. They flew him to the Philippine jungle, where he donned his old uniform, met Onoda, and formally read the order to cease all combat operations. After 29 years, Onoda stood at attention, saluted, and handed over his sword. The psychological architecture holding him hostage was so rigid, it could only be dismantled by the exact authority figure who constructed it. Returning to Japan, the 52-year-old Onoda was treated as a national hero. But the country he came back to was deeply alien to him. The fierce, militaristic empire he had sacrificed his youth for had been replaced by neon lights, glowing television screens, and heavy Western influence. Unable to reconcile his old values with this new reality, he eventually left Japan for Brazil to raise cattle. In 1996, he returned to Lubang Island one last time. He met with the locals, donating money and establishing scholarship funds to help repair the damage he had blindly inflicted on their community. Hiroo Onoda passed away in 2014 at the age of 91. His story proves that geopolitical conflicts don't end simply because a treaty is signed. They end when the human mind is finally allowed to stand down. Onoda won his battle of endurance against the jungle, but he spent his entire life as a casualty of his own unwavering obedience.